What is going on with Kirk Cousins in Atlanta? Ladies and gentlemen, Rich Eisen Show. Tom Pelissero is the insider. All right, so Kirk Cousins is the official last domino to fall, I guess. I don't think he's going to fall anyways, but now that Aaron Rodgers is going to the Steelers. So Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers was the worst kept secret in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers didn't want to go to OTAs. OTAs end. Aaron Rodgers signs with the Steelers. All right, easy puzzle to solve. But now the question is, okay, well then what happens with Kirk Cousins, right? Because if Kirk Cousins, the Steelers were the last team to fill the quarterback slot they have with Rodgers, so is Cousins really going to be a $30 million backup in Atlanta? To that, I say yes. I don't think any team is going to trade for Kirk Cousins. The Falcons have made it clear they're not going to cut Kirk Cousins. They would have already cut him. So they're not going to keep him on the roster, give him the roster bonus, then cut him. No team is going to trade for a $27.5 million contract of Kirk Cousins. So he's just going to be a really expensive backup for Michael Penix. I think that's how it's going to play, unless a team is so desperate for Kirk Cousins' services. And the only team I can really see that could possibly fit that would be the Vikings if J.J. McCarthy is that bad. But that's a bit of a stretch.
What happens here with Kirk Cousins? And is the answer, after all the speculation, all the reports, all the logic you can apply to the situation, is the answer really going to be nothing happens and he is a $27.5 million backup in 2025? At this point, there's not a clear place for Kirk Cousins to go. The Falcons have made abundantly clear that they're not releasing him. If they were going to do that, they would have done that back in March. Yeah. It didn't happen. He now not only has the 27.5 fully guaranteed this year, he's got another 10 million guaranteed in 2026, albeit subject to offsets. But so any team even trading for him is taking on $37.5 million for a player who is battling a lot. Kirk Cousins was pretty banged up last season.
So we're seeing this kind of across the NFL in a bunch of different ways. The two biggest, most glaring things this offseason, or I guess three, were Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, and Kirk Cousins. Every once in a while, you hit this kind of shift at the quarterback position where teams just get younger and new quarterbacks come in and you get this major influx of quarterbacks, and all the bad teams have who they at least believe is their franchise quarterback. Whether it ends up playing out that way, whatever. But you got teams with their guy, and you got teams with the guy who they think is their guy. All right? And if you look across the NFL, 2 drafts ago, 6 quarterbacks went in the first round. So 6 bad teams filled their quarterback role right there. And they're going to give them at least a 2, 3, 4-year runway to see if that actually is their quarterback, right? Then you have other guys who are just tried and true, locked in there. You're good, all right? That encompasses your elite quarterbacks, your Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrows. Then your next tier, okay, you got your Jalen Hurts, you got Geno Smith, you got players like that who, even Sam Darnold, where the team is more than happy with them. And I'm not saying Sam Darnold and Jalen Hurts are the same, but once you just go a tier down and a tier down and a tier down, every team kind of has their guy. And the Steelers were one of those teams where they're looking around like, we don't really have one, right? We let Justin Fields and Russell Wilson walk. We have Mason Rudolph, but we don't really have one. We don't have a young guy. We didn't draft somebody. So Rodgers fits there perfect. But there's not really a place for Kirk Cousins. There's not really a place for Aaron Rodgers and Kirk and Derek Carr, players like that who are past their twilight, who are expensive, who, it's like the changing of the guard happened and they're just kind of suffering the repercussions.
But ultimately got benched in favor of Michael Penix Jr. That is a storyline, Rich, that probably now is not going to be resolved, I wouldn't think, prior to training camp. But the moment that somebody hits their thumb on a helmet, the moment that somebody pulls up lame with a hamstring, the moment anything happens to any quarterback, the first question is going to be, is this the team that trades for Kirk Cousins? And the caution that I would lend to that is the deeper into it that we get, the further into training camp and the preseason, the more that Kirk Cousins, a guy who is due this money regardless of whether he's playing or not, and has family in Atlanta and is raising his kids in Atlanta might be pretty reluctant to go, all right, this guy got hurt in the second preseason game. I'm going to pack up and move to city X, move my family.
Well, I mean, not to mention, like, it's just one of those things that it doesn't really work for anybody. It doesn't really work for Kirk. He's getting the money regardless. It doesn't really work for the team trading for him. Like, okay, if your quarterback jams his finger on a helmet, are you really going to trade assets to then take on a $30 million contract for a not great quarterback who, like, how much do you expect this quarterback to do? So the value just isn't really there for anybody.
Family and go in and try to learn a playbook and learn my teammates quickly here. I don't know that he's going to do that, and he's got a no trade clause. So again, we'll be talking about Kirk Cousins a lot once injuries inevitably hit that position. But we really now are into territory with Aaron Rodgers agreeing with the Steelers where Kirk Cousins might be the Falcons' backup unless and until an opportunity arises through injury or otherwise for him to actually step in the lineup and play football for the Falcons again.
I mean, you even look at a team like the Colts, who are kind of in a quarterback bad situation with Anthony Richardson now being hurt, and Daniel Jones being who I think will end up being the starter. I said that weeks ago, but even the Colts, like, they still do have a responsibility to try and get something out of Richardson. They take him very high in the draft. They are trying to see what they got with him. So even that team, which you would argue is like one of the worst quarterback situations in the league, even that team, it's like, look, we got bigger fish to fry. Okay, we got to figure out this Anthony Richardson thing. If worse comes to worse, we'll rock and roll with Daniel Jones. Is Daniel Jones that much worse than Kirk Cousins? He could be better than Kirk Cousins at this point. Oh, and he doesn't cost $30 million.
And here's okay. So much that you just said about Cousins. I mean, let's have the real conversation here too, Tom. Number one, forget the economics of it. They're not releasing him because
they already paid him.
Just released him, right? Just to say, we're going to do right by you. We'll go into the season without you, even though we're already budgeted for it. Because if they release him, the spot that might take him on the spot is New Orleans, and that very, very, very warm place has got to freeze over. I'm just sitting, right now thinking about that. Maybe Minnesota would take
the New Orleans thing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think it's ridiculous. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? They already have this quarterback battle going on. They're not winning right now. There's no need to bring on an aging, decrepit quarterback who you're not going to get anything out of. And I think that's what happens with this big shift is that you got these guys with a name, like Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, whenever he wasn't retired, the conversations around would he be traded, whatever. Kirk Cousins. And the name is carrying so much more value than they actually are. Like, they're not really doing anything. Like, Kirk Cousins is the same for what the Saints would need as like Jimmy Garoppolo or Joe Flacco or even like Kenny Pickett, where you're just kind of getting a veteran in the room. You're not expecting to win. Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins or whoever isn't going to come to New Orleans and lift that team up to all of a sudden they're an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 win team. Just like Aaron Rodgers isn't going to lift up Pittsburgh. He couldn't lift up the Jets. Kirk Cousins couldn't lift up the Falcons. Like they're showing you who they are. They're showing you who they are at this point in their career. So if you want a bridge quarterback, if you want just a vet, if you want just a stable guy, you can get that guy for way cheaper than it's going to cost to get these quarterbacks we've seen recently with Rodgers and Cousins. You go get Joe Flacco. You go get Jimmy Garoppolo. You go get whoever, name the quarterback. But the idea that Cousins is going to positively impact any team to a degree that someone else couldn't, I think is crazy at this point.
Take a shot, just to have him back there with JJ getting the gig, although that might, create some
dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota is one of the spots because you have so little about JJ McCarthy. We don't even know if he's ready, really. So if it starts to become apparent that, oh yeah, he is not ready, then yeah, if Cousins was free, if he was released, which he's not going to be, but if he was released, yeah, okay, then I can see Minnesota getting Cousins. Like, look, we just need you to exist. We just need a human being in the room to give us a couple of weeks to get McCarthy ready. But they're not going and getting him thinking, all right, well, Kirk can get us back to that 14-win world like Sam did last year.
Yeah, it's a hard dynamic.
Sure.
But from what you just said there, that Cousins might not be willing to go someplace if things, remain status quo too deep. Sounds like a warning shot from his camp to tell the Falcons, be careful, man, because if you want this money off the books, if you've been, playing chicken with us this entire time, we might roost,
Well, think about it this way. If we're just talking logically here, if you're Kirk Cousins, his first year in Minnesota, you remember, was bumpy. The whole season. They missed the playoffs coming off an NFC Championship appearance. It took time. He obviously got better thereafter. They went to the playoffs. They had a playoff win. You go to his first year in Atlanta. Clearly, a really bumpy ride. There's something to be said for any quarterback. I mean,
Kirk is a guy who through his entire career, and I think even in the documentary that Kirk did, Kirk is a quirky guy. Like, he is a regimented, scheduled guy. It is well documented that he is really good during noon Sunday games and really, really bad when he's out of his comfort zone. And he's talked about it before. I'm not making this up. He's talked about how he needs kind of that routine, that structure, that whatever. I don't think it's a coincidence that he has trouble his first year or first few weeks or first few months into a new area. Kirk, what is more routine breaking than up and moving to a brand new city, brand new stadium, brand new coaches, brand new teammates, brand new everything? For someone like Kirk Cousins, that is not an easy situation to walk into.
Even Aaron Rodgers stepping into Pittsburgh here, there's growing pains that you're going to have to go through. And as much as Aaron Rodgers may not believe there's any value in the spring, if you're Kirk Cousins and being told, all right, let's say a team that he does, and I don't want to say a specific team and jinx some fan base here, but let's say some team that runs a completely different offense loses their quarterback and go, all right, we're going to bring in Kirk Cousins now. Does Kirk actually want to go?
Right.
If this is maybe, late July is even different than end of August, September, October. Does he want to go in and do that? That would be an honest conversation. I haven't talked to Kirk about it. I don't know that he would necessarily veto trades at a certain point.
Can he do that? Let me just jump in. He has the right to
Yeah, he's got a no trade clause.
veto a trade, Tom?
He has a no trade clause.
Okay,
so
wow.
He's
got some cards.
This. If the Falcons were going to work with Kirk Cousins to facilitate a trade, they would have done this in February and March. So it's not as if a spot opens up and suddenly Kirk just is going to say, all right, Falcons are going to hold him hostage. Like, when the Eagles got a first-round pick for Sam Bradford because Teddy Bridgewater blew out his knee, that was a function of Howie Roseman and Rick Spielman, who knew each other well, being like, all right, realistically, you don't have a quarterback. I'm going to get this, and so we got to get this thing done quickly. And they moved very quickly, and they acquired Sam Bradford on cutdown day. I mean, those things can happen, but when you have a no-trade clause, it does raise the specter of Kirk Cousins saying, you know what? I don't really want to move my family to City X in October and then just hope I can microwave the rhythm and timing and tempo that it takes to succeed in an NFL passing offense. Again, I'm not saying he wouldn't do it. I'm just saying that is certainly realistic and logical from Kirk Cousins' perspective. If I'm going to make the same exact money to be in Atlanta, at least a system I know, maybe something happens to Michael Penix and I get to play here versus going into a place you don't know the players, you don't know the coaches, you don't know the system, and try to pick it up midstream without even an off season. Kirk Cousins' own experience, Rich, would tell you that might not be an instantaneous yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you also had to wonder, the only thing that we can't know is, does Kirk still view himself as, I should be a starter in the NFL? I want to be a starter in the NFL. I deserve to be a starter. I'll move heaven and earth to be a starter in the NFL. If that's his mindset, then yeah, maybe he does. The first phone that calls, maybe he says, okay, sure, I'm ready. Or has he accepted, all right, I'm a backup. I'm going to take this $30 million. I'm going to go through this season. I'll be a backup. I'll get my reps in. If something happens to Penix, I'll play, whatever. We'll wait it out. But that desperation to start may have waned, and we don't know. But, yeah, I mean, I think Cousins, I would – right now it looks like all signs point to he's going to be a very expensive backup in Atlanta. And just what a what a disastrous marriage that was last year for the Falcons. Just a complete disaster. But all right, let me know in the comments below what you think. Will Kirk end up staying in Atlanta, or will he go somewhere else? Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.